Hey everyone, and welcome to Mijo Podcast. You're probably sitting there wondering, what the heck is Mijo Podcast? Who the heck are you? But I'm here to break it all down for you. Starting off with our first episode, thank you so much for joining. But Mijo Podcast is honestly a podcast where we're going to share first generation experiences, lived experiences by me, of course, talk about culture, talk about glow ups, talk about healing, figuring things out along the way, and honestly, just like embracing our roots. I think for me, it's really important to talk about that just because it's so ingrained in who I am as a person. And it's like such a big part of my identity. And I love it that way. We're going to have real conversations. I'm expecting us to laugh, cry, like get excited, and really just like all subjects are on the table. No filters, have a real conversation because I know you guys at home can relate to a lot of the topics that we're talking about. So thank you so much for joining. A little bit about me. My name is Axel Perez. I am born and raised in Southeast LA, and I myself am a first generation, individual. Both of my parents immigrated to the USA when they were teenagers, and really growing up, I had like the full on first generation experience. And I feel like you have an experience with your culture, but being a first generation individual is also a unique experience. And combining both of those is crazy. So I'm going to dive into a little bit of the reason why I started this podcast later in this episode. But today's episode is really important to me because it's something that's very recent, something that I'm very proud of. And as you see by the title, I'm going to talk about my commencement speech. So I graduated this past May from Cal State Fullerton with a BA in public administration. Yes, I don't know why I doubted myself. Public administration. It took me 5 years to freaking complete this degree, you guys. 5 years. I first started off as a business administration major because I like swore that I wanted a business, which I feel like we all do at some point, right? And I still do. But I was like going through it, like I was having a crisis, and I was like, once I started getting to like the numbers, which are not my thing, I was like, oh shit, like this is not for me. And I really went to my counselor and I was like, girl, like we need to figure something out because I failed math 2 times already, and there's still like 3 other tiers of math that I need to get to, and I haven't gotten through the first one. So I was working at a school district, and she was like, why don't you give that a try? Like, public administration is that. And I looked into it, and I was like, let's do it. So I've always been a public speaker, as you can tell by, like, of course, this podcast. And I just love to talk. If I literally get paid to talk. Like, that's literally my job during the day. But if I'm being real with you guys, like, I have always been one to like volunteer for speaking gigs, and I've always been one to be like, pick me, pick me. When I promoted from elementary school to middle school, I gave a speech to like the promoting class. Didn't do one for middle school. I just didn't do one. But for high school, I also got to do another one because I was ASB president. So I've always like kind of like done some sort of public speaking. And as graduation season was getting closer, a lot of people started posting like TikTok videos from, recirculating like graduation videos of speakers. And I was like, oh my God, like that looks like so much fun. Like I want to be a commencement speaker. And I was like, that's a little crazy. Like this is like college. Like there's so many people that go to college. And I'm sure like, I didn't know how the process was. I was like, I'm sure there's like some specific way to apply. And I'm sure it's probably like people that are involved and like committed to the organization, yada, 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 yada. So I didn't really know. So I searched it up online on Google. There wasn't much for my like specific college, like humanities and social sciences. So I was like, damn it, like I really don't know how to do this. So I remembered I had a professor, great professor, love her to death. She had mentioned like she was part of some sort of like administration for our department. So I reached out to her, and she's actually the deputy chair of our department. So like right under the chair for our department. And I reached out to her, and she was like, hey, like you're in luck because that's actually like my thing. She's like, one of the things that I oversee are commencement speeches. I work with students and the panel that's going to select them. And like, that's my whole jazz. So she was like, I'm going to give you like all the details, like, for you to fill out. And she did. She sent me an email and she was like, well, you first need to submit a 350 word, speech. The panel's going to review it. They're kind of going to get a grip of your message, kind of like where you're looking to go with your speech. And then based off of that, they're going to make their selection. So I was like, cool. Great. I think at this point we were probably, yeah, we were like in midterms because this was before spring break. So I was like, another paper that I'm gonna have to like freaking write, you know? So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna do it. So I thought about it, and I would honestly go through different waves. I was like, I'm gonna do it, I'm not gonna do it. And I was just so like nervous about it because I was like, no, like this is totally not your thing. Like don't do it. Um, but I was like, I'm just going to try and make it very personal, because if it's personal, it's going to be a unique speech. I don't want it to be like one of those cringy speeches that's like, today marks the beginning of a new journey for us. And, you know, we're going to do this. We're like, no, I was like, it has to be good. And I felt personally that the only way that it was going to be good is if it was, you know, unique to me. And at the time, this was before things got crazy, but at the time, things were starting to get a little tense. This is before spring break, so this is probably like, I want to say maybe like April, but things started getting tense nationally, you know, politically on the national level. Things were getting a little tense, not as tense as they have recently got in the past few months. But I was like, you know what? I am going to make this about like my identity and my culture, and really just highlight, you know, how us first generation Latino, like, you know, individuals, like we can break through the ceiling and we can do it. Like we're getting degrees. Everything that they're talking about us in the news is not all true. Like, you know, we are educated and we're getting there. We're brown educated folks. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do that. Where did I know how to start? I was like, I don't. I wanted to really just, you know, make sure that other people could relate to it. But then at the same time, I was kind of sharing my story. So I think that's what was the challenging part, that I was like, well, I'm going to share my story. But then I was like, wait, like I want people to connect to it. So I just wrote something, and honestly, I didn't know if it was going to get picked or not, because it was very cultural. It was very much like about my identity. I talked a lot about like, you know, my parents and the advice that they give us, you know, like the dichos que nos dicen. And I submitted it, and I was like, you know, if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If it's for me, it'll come. And if it's not for me, it'll go to the person that deserves it. And I submitted it. They told us, you're going to hear back from us the week of spring break. So just keep an eye out on your emails. And I was like, perfect. So I remember spring break came, and I was like looking at my phone, looking at my email. And I was just kind of like, like, you know, is it today the day that they're going to send them out? It wasn't the day. It's today. So I kind of like waited the entire spring break for like an email, and I didn't hear back from Cal State Fullerton. So I was like, damn. I was like, I didn't get picked, and these fools didn't even send me like a thank you for applying like email. I was like, these fools literally were just like, alrighty, like you didn't get it. And I was a little bummed out about it. I'm not gonna lie, because when I wrote the speech and I submitted it, I was like, this is 50-50. Like, you know, Cal State Fullerton is a very diverse campus, and they offer a lot of programs and a lot of resources for minorities and all the groups that they have on campus. Cal State Fullerton is the best at that. Don't get me wrong. But Cal State Fullerton is also in Orange County. And for those of you that don't know, Orange County is known as a conservative county. So I didn't know, honestly, like the angle that the panel was looking at these speeches. I was like, are they looking at them, you know, one would think from the beliefs of the campus, the mission, and like, you know, really just like on behalf of the campus? Or are they keeping in mind what's happening politically, their county, and, you know, really just like taking all that into consideration? Because things were starting to get tense. And my speech was like very cultural. So I was like, I honestly don't know where this is going to go. So I was 50-50. I'm like, 50% they're going to love it and they're going to be like, chef's kiss. This is what we should be like uplifting, and we should be having these kids have this platform. Or they're like, maybe we don't want to kind of like be so out there because we don't want to get picked on. So spring break had passed. I was back at work. It was Monday morning. I remember I'm sitting at my computer and I'm just, you know, going at it. I think I was doing like emails or something. And I'm just like looking at it, and I get an email, and the email starts off with like congratulations, and the notification goes off on my phone. So I look down at it, and I was like, congratulations. I was like, oh, it's probably one of those spam, like, you won a car. And I was like, girl, I did not win a car. So I looked at it, and then I saw that it was from, you know, my former professor. And then I was like, holy shit, like this could be the email. So I like panicked and I grabbed my phone and I opened the email, and lo and behold, it was the email. It was like, congratulations on being selected as a commencement speaker to represent your class. And I was like, no freaking way. Like, I really did this. Like, what? So I remember I opened the phone and I'm looking at it and I'm reading it, and she's telling me, right, like, congratulations, you've been selected. She's telling me all about it. And she's like, you're going to be paired up with someone that's going to proofread your speech and that's going to be there with you throughout the way to make it perfect. And then she's like, here's the calendar of events. Like, you need to submit rough drafts, and then you need to submit, like, I think it was like 2 rough drafts, 1 final review for the department, and then 1 final review for the president's office. And then you have to submit your final draft for closed captioning, because they do like closed captioning on the live stream. So I was like, oh my God, like, what the heck did I get myself into? I was like, dude, this is a lot. Like, this is freaking crazy. I remember I was so excited. I go out into like the general area of like my work area, and I like told my coworkers, and I was like, dude, like, I just got selected to be freaking commencement speaker for my graduation like ceremony. Like, what the heck? And the thing about my job is like, there's a big part of us. I want to say, I'm trying to think. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There's 6 of us that went to Cal State Fullerton, and we're like Cal State Fullerton alumni. So we're like hardcore titans, like on our floor. And I think our department's probably like 13 people or something like that. So everyone was like jumping with excitement, and they were like, dude, that's freaking crazy. Like, there's no way. And I was like, yeah, like, I was so excited. I didn't tell my family. This is where it starts to get like crazy. I tell my family everything. Like, I love my family and I tell them everything. And I'm always like, they've honestly been there. Like, there's a huge support system, and they're always there to kind of like guide me through the process and encourage me and be like, no, you can do this, or like, whatever it is, right? But I didn't tell them because, I included them in the speech, and I included a lot of phrases that my parents told us growing up. And, like, I wanted it to be special. And I had always seen speeches online where people like surprise their family. And I was like, I want to do that. Like, I want to genuinely surprise them. And I wanted to just be like a shock factor. So I didn't tell them, which was the hardest freaking thing ever for me, because if you know me, I tell my family everything, and I freaking love to talk. I can't keep my mouth shut. So for me, that was hard because I was seeing my family throughout like all these weeks. Mind you, this is like 2 months before commencement. And I'm just like holding it in. And I'm the person that, like, my family knows everything. So I was like, there were several times where I was like, I'm going to tell them, F it, I'm going to tell them, I'm going to tell them. And then I was like, no, like, bite your tongue, hold on to it longer. But yeah, I was like, you know what? I'm not going to tell them. I'm going to keep it a surprise. So I paired up with my editor and I sent him my speech, and we did, I think, like 3 reviews of my speech. We were going back and forth. He was like, oh, just typical editing process. He would highlight things and he would say, like, this is a little repetitive. I would recommend you remove this. They're really trying to keep us on the word count because, of course, they have multiple commencement speakers and the ceremony is 2 hours long. So they're really just trying to keep us like organized and really, I think it was a good thing because, of course, someone's looking at your speech from like a nonpartisan like point of view, so they're able to see what you're getting at. And I remember telling my editor, I was like, I really want to like convey my story, but have it connect to others. So there was a few things that we took out. There was things that were repetitive. There was a lot of sentence fillers that he was like, you can really just cut this out. I remember there was a line that he wanted me to remove. I'm blanking out on it right now, but it was towards the end of my speech. It was something about like my cultural identity is complex, and something like that. And he was like, well, your speech is full of like identity. Like, do you really need to talk about this? And I remember kind of going back and forth with him and being like, I really want to keep that in the speech. Like, it's important to me and I really want to keep it in there. So he was like, okay, like, it's your speech. If you want to keep it in there, like, you can keep it in there. And we did. So I submitted my first draft to the department and they loved it. They were like, this is great. by the time that we had the deadline for the second draft, I didn't really have any other edits because the department thought that it was great. But I reread it and I made a few changes. I was like, okay, I can change this. I really just slimmed it down a little bit. And we submitted it to the president's office. No problems there as well. And then the one thing I do remember, and President R, if you're watching this, which I don't know if you are, please forgive me, but I opened up my speech like very formal, and I was like, like good evening, like President Roachman, dignitaries, guests, and the class of 2025. I, for the life of me, could not pronounce the president's last name. And I was like, oh, I can't pronounce it. But the school was like, okay, we have to do a table read. They're like, we have to get all of the speakers together. We're going to do a table read. We're going to work on like, your delivery with you. And I was like, I'm going to ask them, I was like, I'm going to ask them like, how do you pronounce this name? So they set up like this huge table read for us. And I remember I had to like leave work early because it's like, I think it was at like 2:00 or something like that. And I was like, okay, so I'm leaving work early to get there. I get there and I'm like so nervous because I'm like, I'm going to have to like present this speech in front of everyone. There's going to like, that's kind of like dumb, right? But I always personally think that it's easier for you to present a speech to a bigger audience than it is to a little audience. Because if you're presenting a speech to a little audience, like let's say you're in like a classroom or something, everyone's right in front of you. So you're making direct eye contact with people. You're like, boom, 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 right? So you can kind of like gauge people's like, vibe when you're in a smaller audience versus if you're in a bigger room with like more people, example, the commencement, you really don't see people's reaction. So you're not too nervous, at least in my personal experience, because I know public speaking for everyone is different. But at least for me, I was like, you know what, this is kind of like, it's fine. So I showed up. Everyone was there. Everyone shared their speeches, beautiful speeches, by the way. Like, I really think this year, all of the panels of judges did a really great job at picking speeches because every single speech told a story. And I think that was beautiful because we've heard speeches before that are very like generic. And it's honestly like, our life starts today and you're going to go out into your careers and, never forget where you come from and always come back and give, the opportunity, like, which is great. Don't get me wrong. But I think there's something unique and special about having a story that's unique to someone. And I was hearing everyone's speeches and I was honestly sitting there like, Jesus Christ, like, oh my God, I don't even think mine is that good. But I was like, well, who cares? I remember I go up in front of everyone and I'm like in the middle of the classroom, introduce myself. And the first thing I asked Amelia, who was from the dean's office, I was like, how do you pronounce the president's name? And she's like, if you can't pronounce it now, you're not going to be able to pronounce it then. Take it out. And I was like, we're taking it out. So that was the last edit that I made to my speech. I removed his name and I just said dignitaries, guests, and class of 2025. Because I was like, the last thing I want to do is stutter the president's name on my way out. Like, come on now. So I did. I did my speech. Everyone loved it, which I was like immediate, like, pressure lift off of my chest. I was a little fast, I'm not gonna lie, because I was just trying to get it over with, but they gave me some constructive criticism. They're like, just slow down, make sure you're looking at the audience and you're engaging with them. And I was like, all right, let's do this. So the day after our table read, we had a in-person run-through on campus. So we had to go down to the field where our ceremony was taking place. We were able to see the entire like setup, the stage, the seating, where families were going to sit. And we all lined up. They gave us instructions. They basically said like, at this time, you're going to get up and you're going to go to this side of the stage, and they put us in order. They're like, this is the order you're going to be in on commencement day. So make sure you're behind this person. And then they told us like, all right, one by one, we went up to the stage and we just kind of said like one brief sentence just to kind of like get a feel of the microphone. because one of the things that Amita kept telling us was like, you're saying it now in this room, but once you say it on stage and you hear that feedback and you hear your voice echo, a lot of people get frightened. And a lot of people, like, if they don't do a run through, it messes them up. So we did that. Everything was cool. I got to meet the other commencement speakers, kind of like chit chat with them, which I thought was amazing. And I was like so excited. Pause though. It was so freaking hot because that was the week that we started having like a heat wave. It was the week of May 20 something. The weather was so good leading up to it. So I was excited because I kept tracking the weather and I was like, it's going to be nice. It's going to be a nice, chill weather. Like, we're going to be great. And then the heat wave comes and it literally started on Wednesday, which was the day of my commencement. And I was like, God, you're killing me. I literally went to Walmart right after rehearsal and I went to go buy some, like a little portable fan because I was like, this is not going to be cool. So I go home, take a nap, go to sleep, wake up the next day. This is the day of commencement. My aunt had taken me out to brunch because they got the day off of work. So we went out to brunch and I was so freaking nervous. I was so nervous. And the thing that was weird for me is that I'm not the type to get nervous when I public speak. Like, yeah, I get the butterflies in my stomach, but I'm not the one to kind of like freak out and be like, oh my God, I can't do this. Like, but I was so nervous. I couldn't tell them that because they didn't know about the speech. And I was like, if you bit your tongue for 2 whole months, you better not like mess it up and tell them right now, like, a few hours before the event. So I was like, if you were able to bite your mouth for like 2 months, you can like hold it in for these next few hours. So I'm at brunch with them and, we're talking and we're chit-chatting and we're kind of going over like, the ceremony and how excited they are for me and like la 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 la. And I'm like nervous. And I kept telling my aunt, like, oh my God, I'm so nervous. And she was like, why? Like, you're done. Like, you had fun. Like, have fun. Like, this is what you work hard for. And I was like, yeah. So it's time to get ready for commencement. I was running a little bit behind because I had to be there. So the students had to be there like an hour earlier, but I had to be there a little bit earlier than that. So I'm like, rushing to get ready. It's hot as heck. I remember I like, did my hair, put a little bit of like, sunblock and all this like stuff on my face. I got to campus and I was just like, I was driving to campus and I had like music bumping in the car and everything. But it was one of those experiences where like, you're kind of like the music's playing, but you're kind of like in your head and you're really not like listening to the music. Like there's music playing, but you're kind of like, I don't even know what song just played last. It was one of those. I'm like driving to school and I'm just like nervous. And I've never been nervous, you guys. And I was just like, oh my God, like there's so many people. Like, what if I mess up? What if people don't think my speech is good? Like, what if they think it's offensive? What if they think I'm like full of it because it's like my personal experience? And I talked to a friend about this like after, and she told me like the reason why you were so nervous is because your speech was very personal and it was very much about like your lived experience. And I thought about that and I was like, she's right. Like the reason why I was so scared was because it was a topic, like, it was a story that's very personal to me and that's really rooted and embedded in my identity. And that's why it was scary, because I was going to open up and share that with people. I was going to let people in and kind of let them know like my struggles, my upbringing and how all of that blended to have this beautiful outcome of who I am as an individual. And that's why I was nervous. I wasn't nervous so much about the public speaking because I've done public speaking for a long time. I was nervous about letting people in. And that blew my mind because I was like, isn't it so crazy how life just works? Like, I thought it was crazy. And I realized like, oh my God, it's so true. Like it's, you have a little bit of fear of like, I'm going to get judged. Because of course, like it's life. Like not everyone's on the same wavelength as you. So I'm sure, there's people that are not going to vibe with my subject. There's people that are going to feel connected. There's people that are going to think they could have done better. that's life. And I think that's the reason why I was nervous. So I got to commencement. I checked in. I was chatting with friends. I actually took like selfies with classmates that I have, had before. And it's time for commencement. We're walking down and we're walking into the field. I'm trying to look for my family in the wave of people. Couldn't find no one, by the way. And I remember my professor was like, everyone just wave and pretend you found your family. They're going to think they're making eye contact with you. And because you're waving so like vigorously, they're going to think that they found you. But she's like, just look at the crowd and just wave. So I'm just like walking down and I'm just like waving like crazy. And I'm like, hey, like I see you, boo. I didn't see nobody. But yeah, so like I'm sitting there and I'm just like, you know what? F it. Like I'm going to do it. It is what it is. Like lo que va a pasar, va a pasar. Like si se va a armar, se va a armar. Y si no, like I messed up, oh well, whatever. It's time for us to go. And I was the second to last speaker, I think. Yeah. I was the second to last speaker. So I'm sitting on stage. Well, not sitting. I'm standing on the side of stage and everyone's going. And I'm just there like, oh my God. Oh my God. By this point, my family knew that like something was up because the way that they did it is like, they introduced everything, right? Like, oh, kind of like the ceremony and the songs and everything. And then they introduced the people that were like graduating with honors. So they were like, rise. And that was our cue to walk to the corner of the stage because like since a lot of people were getting up, you kind of just like sneak away. So by the time everyone sits down, like my family sees me on the side of the stage. And I remember I was getting text messages and one of my friends, one of my great friends, Mariana, she was all like, are you going to do a speech? And I was like, maybe. And she's like, you fucking bitch. She's like, we keep secrets from each other now. And I was like, I had to. So by that point, my family like knew something was up because like I'm on the side of stage. I'm in line. The line's getting shorter. Clearly, this line is for people that are going to speak, but they still really didn't know like what was going to go on. So I go up there. They introduce me. I'm like shitting bricks, if I'm being honest with you guys. I'm like so nervous. And I'm like, you know what? Just let it take over. I started reading, made my eye contact with the crowd. I saw a few folks that were like nodding their heads. As I'm saying my speech, there's certain parts where people are like screaming. One of my favorite parts, which was really important for me to keep in my speech, was the part where I said, like, sometimes we feel como que no somos ni de aquí ni de allá, but I'm here to say, screw that. Soy de aquí, soy de allá. People just went crazy. Like, people were just like going crazy. And I feel like once I started hearing the people's reaction and how people were really celebrating the message, it really just gave me like courage. And it really just kind of like reassured me so much that I was on a roll. I just kept going. There's a part of my speech where I talk about like, my parents growing up had always told us like, te podrán quitar el dinero, te podrán quitar lo material, pero nunca te van a quitar la educación. Basically just telling us like, they can take anything like physical and materialistic away from you, but the one thing they could never, ever, ever take away from you is your education and the knowledge that education brings you. And they told us that so many times growing up when times were tough, when we would cry because we were like, doing essays and stressed out, like every single time my parents would encourage us with that. And I feel like that was something so special that stuck with me throughout all my educational career that I was like, that's the first thing that I'm going to put in that speech. So I put it in there and I remember saying like, te podrán quitar el dinero, te podrán quitar la educación. Digo, ay, no, te podrán quitar todo, pero la educación. And the crowd just went crazy. And then I remember saying like, the crowd goes crazy. And then I followed up that phrase with saying something along the lines of like, and with that power, like you're unstoppable. And the crowd went even more crazy. And I was like, I did it. I shared my personal story and I connected with people. And it was the most beautiful thing ever. I felt every freaking emotion. Like I was still nervous. I was shy. I was like blushing because people are like going crazy. I felt like part of me wanted to cry because I was like, this is it. Like when you're up there and you look at the sea of graduates and then you look at all the parents, like it really hits you. It's a full circle moment. And I was just standing there taking it all in and just being like, I'm done. Like, that's it. My BA is done. It honestly was like, it gave me chills. And I remember going back to my seat, and as I'm walking back, everyone's like, good job. Like, you did great. And even like when I sit down, like all my friends were like, dude, that was amazing. Professor in front of me turned around and was like, oh my God, like that was well said. And, when it was time for me to go up and kind of like do the handshake with leadership, we lined up close to where the parents were at, and there was a few folks that were telling me like, your speech was amazing, like you're gonna go somewhere, like keep going. And it really was just so like heartwarming to hear that, because it really just told me like, it was like, you did it. Like you were able to deliver a powerful speech that was personal to you, but that so many people saw themselves in. And I was like, that's great. I had a graduation trip that I like impromptu had planned to go to Houston, Texas. I want to go see Ivan Cornejo, who was amazing, by the way. So I literally flew out the next day to Houston, Texas. I actually missed my flight. I think because I overslept. I think the reason why I overslept was because the speech had been weighing on me for so long that, that night I was just kind of like, I felt like that SpongeBob meme when he's like rising, because I had like no stress. There was like no more essays, no more speech, like nothing to look forward to, because I was working on the speech as finals were approaching, so that was a little bit stressful. And then finals finished and I'm still working on the speech, right? We're doing the table read, we're doing the in-person run through. So then at that point, I was like completely done. I was like, we're done. So I slept in a little bit, but I was able to coordinate my travel and I still got out there. And there was a lot of waiting that I did, of course, because I missed my flight, but then also you're just kind of like waiting for your flight because, you're there at the airport. So I thought to myself, like, what if I post like some of my clips on TikTok? Like I see people always posting like, their speeches on there. Like that's where this inspiration came from like seeing other people like, give kick-ass speeches. So I was like, F it. Like you don't lose anything, right? Like, que voy a perder? So I was like, I'm going to, do some cute little edits, add some music. And I was like, I'm going to post these on TikTok to see what happens. I honestly didn't think that it was going to go viral because I've posted other TikToks before and they get like 5 likes, 20 likes at most. So for me, I was just kind of like, I'm going to post it, whatever. Like, it's in God's hands. So I posted 4 videos. 4 videos. Out of the 4 videos, 2 of them went viral. One of them got 168.5K views. And then 28.6K likes. The other one got 3,000. You see how bad I am with numbers, you guys? I can't even freaking read the numbers that are on my card. Okay, video 1 got 168.5K views and 28.6K likes. And video 2 got 370.4K views and 26.6K likes. I'm like horrible at numbers, you guys. If I see numbers, I freaking freak out. My math is always wrong. But I remember I posted the videos. I hop on my flight. I don't think anything of it, right? I'm in the air. There's no freaking internet. I'm not going to pay like freaking $8 for internet. So I'm just like, listening to music or whatever. And I remember I get off the plane and my phone's like, I have a few notifications. And I go to my TikTok and it has like 300 likes, right? And I was like, oh, cute. I got 300 likes, whatever. Put my phone away, hustle to go get my rental car. And my phone's just kind of like going off. And I see like another like come in, 2 likes come in, a comment come in. And I was like, what? So I finally get to my hotel room and I settle in. And at that point, it was like, it was going towards the thousands. It was like, 900 and then 1,000. And then it quickly was jumping to like 2,000. I remember I took a shower as soon as I got to the hotel, come out the shower and it's like 3,000. And I was like, what the heck? Go to dinner and like slowly but surely it started picking up speed. And I think that's the thing with TikTok. Like it's very slow at first, but once it builds momentum, like it kind of like pushes you along the way. So it started building. And I remember by the time I went to dinner, which I probably went to dinner like around 9 o'clock, if I'm being honest, it had a couple thousand. It was like 6K. And I remember thinking like, oh my God, 6,000, that's a lot. It doesn't look like a lot, right? Because you just see like six and like, 800 or whatever. But then once it kind of got to like 10K, you see the double digit, you see like 10.5K. I was like, oh my God, like this is spreading. I was like, what the heck? And everyone's comments were just so nice. It was honestly like the same reaction of what people like at the ceremony were like experiencing. Like people were just saying, it was so heartwarming because I saw a lot of like parents comment, and a lot of parents were like, your parents must be so proud. Like, Mijo, I'm not related to you, but you made me so proud. And everyone honestly just kept sharing like different things. Like there was a few people that were like, my parents told me the same thing. Like no one could ever take away your education. There was people that were saying like, this is so inspirational, like you nailed it, like, kick-ass Latinos were making it. And really, I just saw this like huge community form. And if anything, the most thing that I felt at that moment was honor. Like I felt so honored that I was able to share my message so precise that it connected with people and that people resonated and that people like would go out of their way to say, my mom told me that. I always tell my kids that. There was a gentleman who said like, yo siempre le inculco lo mismo a mis hijos. Espero que mi hijo sea como tú cuando llegue al colegio. And I was like, what the heck? And it was honestly just so surreal because there was people on there that were saying like, Mijo, like this is amazing. And it was I don't even know how to put it into words because I was like, what the heck? Like you can, and if you go to my TikTok page, like you can go through the comments and a lot of people are just like complimenting it. And I was like genuinely mesmerized. I remember going back to work after my time off because I had put time off to go to this concert, right? And I took a few extra days because I was like, I'm stress free. Like, I really was like, I'm just going to hang out for a few days. I'm going to go to Houston. I'm going to come back and I'm just going to like, take some time off before coming back to work. I go back to work and everyone's like, you're back. And I was like, yeah, I'm back. And they're like, we thought you weren't going to come back. And I was like, why? And everyone's like, because we saw your video. And I was like, what? One of my coworkers was like, yeah. He's like, my wife was scrolling through TikTok and she's like, isn't this Axel? And I was like, no way. Like, what? My other coworker was like, my daughter comes to me and she's like, isn't this your coworker? And everyone was just starting to share stories. Everyone was like, like, so-and-so sent me the video. And I was like, that's my coworker. So everyone was kind of like joking with me. And they're like, oh, we thought you weren't going to come back. We're like, he made it. He's famous. Like, boom, he's not coming back. Like, he's not even going to tell us he's coming back. And I was like, oh my God, you guys, like, I'm going to come back. Like, it's just 2 videos. Like, I'm not going to make a living off of that. And everyone was like encouraging me. I had a coworker who was telling me like, dude, like you need to leverage this. Like you need to jump on this and you need to like, honestly, like do it. Like you have all these new followers. Cause I got up to like 1,400 followers overnight because literally my page was like 100 followers and it was all friends and family that knew me. And from that, I jumped up to like 1,400. And everyone was like, dude, like you have the momentum right now. Like you need to jump on it. Like do it. And a lot of my coworkers were like, if there's one person we know that could be an influencer, that could be like famous and kind of like make it, is you. They're like, you have the personality, like you have the stories, you love to talk, like do it. And I remember I thought about it and I was like, no, that's crazy. Like I have a corporate job. Like there's no way that I can be like, an influencer and have a corporate job. And I kind of let it marinate in the back of my head. And every day that like another day would go by, my coworkers would come by my office and they'd be like, you have to do it. Did you think about it? Did you think about it? And I was like, you know what? F it. I'm gonna try it. So I remembered I went on Amazon that night and I ordered like a little tripod, a little ring light, some microphones, and I was like, I'm just gonna start going live and I'm gonna try it a little bit. And I did. I remember I went live and I made like $2 on live, which I was like, hey, $2 I didn't have before. Um, and it was cool, but honestly, the biggest thing I still want to do it. Don't get me wrong. I think I posted like 3 or 4 videos. Um, the biggest thing is like, of course, you have to be consistent in order to like get an audience and like for TikTok to say like, hey, we can rely on this creator. Let's bump him up and get him like viewed by more people. But it takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And I remember like I have a lot of videos in my camera roll to this day that are filmed. I just haven't had the time to sit down and edit them. And I've reached out to people. I went like online to look for like a video editor. The two of the people that I reached out to, they kind of like fell through the cracks. And I still kind of want to do it. So I'm trying to figure out a way to like go back to like making TikTok content. But I thought to myself, like, I just went through this whole creative process where I was like, what content can I create? Right. So I went to ChatGPT and I was like, hey, like, I explained the whole situation. And ChatGPT is like, you need to find an audience. Like, it kind of like guided me through the steps. Right. And it's like, you have to find an audience. You have to like pick your niche. Like, what's your topic going to be? And it's recommended to me. It was like, your videos that went viral are, yes, they're on your commencement speech, but they're very cultural. And it's really about your identity and about being first gen. So one of the things that it recommended, like it recommended a few like kind of like videos that I could do on my TikTok, but it also recommended a podcast. And I was like, I saw that and I was like, I kind of like that idea. So I was like, no, that's freaking crazy. Like, whatever. And I remember, like, there's a few podcasts that I listen to out there. And I was watching one of my favorite podcasts. And I was just like, in the back of my mind, I was like, start a podcast. Like, this could be your podcast. Like, do it. And I was like, that's a crazy idea. Like, if I don't have time to edit these freaking videos, I'm not going to have time to put on like a whole full blown on podcast, right? So I reached out to my brother because my brother is an audio engineer and a producer. It's actually what he got his degree in. And I told him, like, crazy idea, but I want to start a podcast. Like, will you help me out? Because, of course, I have like no knowledge on like audio or anything like that. And he was like, let's do it. So I think that also like gave me a little boost of confidence because I was like, okay, I'm not doing this like all on my own. Like, I have my brother here with me. He's actually sitting right here, swapping behind the cameras and like listening to the audio. And I was like, let's do it. Like, let's do it. So I remember I even, guys, I thought about this so much that I even freaking told both of my therapists about this. Like, they were like, oh, so like, what's new? Like, how are you enjoying like your post-college life? And I was telling them like, oh, I'm going to the gym. I'm eating healthy. I'm going out with friends, a lot of brunches, a lot of dinners, la, la, la. And I told them like, I have this crazy idea. And they were like, do it. Both of them were like, do it. Like, you have the charisma. You have the personality. Do it. And that was also like a huge encouragement for me because I was like, well, they're telling me that, like, everyone's telling me like, you could do it. I'm like, at the end of the day, the decision is like, comes down to me. Like, if everyone's encouraging me and supporting me, like, I'll do it. And actually, funny enough, I forgot to mention this, but one of my therapists came across my viral videos on TikTok. So she was like the one that really, really pushed me because I remember like, the week after I came back to therapy, and I log on and she's like, oh, how was your trip? And we're talking about it. And then I told her like, hey, by the way, I posted these videos on TikTok, like not thinking they were going to go anywhere and they went viral. And she's like, yeah, I know. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, I saw them. We saw them at the office. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah. She's like, had just come back from the weekend. She's like, and one of my colleagues was like, oh my God, you guys, I saw this really awesome like clip of this young man who gave a commencement speech and it was like amazing. And everyone was like, show us. She's like, so she pulled out her phone And she pulled up the TikTok and it was you. And I was like, no way. I was like, you're lying. And she's like, no. She's like, of course, you're my client. So because of like, privacy and confidentiality, like I couldn't tell them that you were my client. She's like, but I like felt a burst of emotion like in me to see how I was like finding out about you through a TikTok that my colleague wanted to share with us that she like discovered, over the weekend on her own. And I think for me, that was like mind blown because I was like, dude, it's really such a small world. Because I was like, it's funny how I'm coming to therapy excited to tell my therapist that my video had gotten some views. And she's one of those, right? She's like, you did an amazing job. She's like, your speech was classic. It was timeless. It was beautiful. Um, and she really encouraged me. We had a session and she was like, just be yourself, relax, breathe. She's like, you're an amazing person. You radiate awesome energy. She's like, so just do it. And I thought like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And looking back now, like, I'm so glad that I did the speech because it honestly like led to so many like beautiful moments, like of course the emotions of going through the speech and that whole experience, like that's an experience that I'm going to be able to like tell for life. I'm going to be able to be like, hey, let me tell you about the time I gave a commencement speech. Not only that, the experience that I was able to have with my family, the surprise element of them like, hearing about the speech. I remember after the ceremony when we met up, everybody was like, what the heck? Why didn't you tell us? Like, you tell us everything. And I was like, I know, I wanted it to be an experience. And everyone's like crying. One of my greatest friends, Magali, was like, dude, as soon as I like saw you go up there, I was like, that's my baby. She was telling me that people around her like thought she was my mom. So they were like, oh my God, congrats to your son. And she was like, I don't care. I embraced it. I was like, yes, thank you. Thank you. So I had like 4 moms in the crowd who were like, that's my baby. And I feel like that experience was so memorable and it was such a core memory because not only am I going to remember like my graduation and the people that were there to experience that with me, but we're going to be able to share this memory of like my speech. I was also able to like have the whole experience of that gratitude, that connection with other people who I realized, it was a personal story to me, but they somehow, some way also connected and saw themselves in that story. And that's honestly why I decided to start this podcast because I was like, we have a lot of amazing creators out there. We have a lot of amazing podcasts. And yes, there's Latino creators, of course. Like I'm not gonna come on here and claim that I'm the only Latino creator. And yes, other people are probably doing what I'm doing, but I was like, I want to continue to share my experiences, my lived first gen experiences, and I want to continue connecting with people. And I think it really just motivated me because I thought, this might sound too cocky to people because they might think like, oh, it's all about him. But I quickly realized that while my story was personal, a lot of people related to it. And I was like, dude, I have so many topics that I can talk about. I could talk about career. I could talk about college, like being a first generation college student. I can talk about, like going to therapy. Like that's such a culture shock for people that are, Latinos or like any culture in general. And I was like, all these ideas started coming to mind. And I was like, I can talk about so many things. And what better way to do it than with a podcast? So that honestly, like, I'm so glad that I did the speech and I'm so honored. Like, thank you so much to the panel and to Cal State Fullerton for supporting me because it honestly transcribed into so many moments, so many emotions, and genuinely led to this podcast. And that's the full circle moment, if I'm being honest with you guys, because that little speech, quote unquote, little, right, led to this moment. And I'm so excited because I have so many like episodes in mind. I genuinely want to talk about everything and I want to go out and connect with people. I'm already talking with folks on having guests come onto the podcast. So you're not just going to hear from me. I'm going to invite friends. I'm going to invite family. And I'm even going to try to reach out to other folks that have interesting stories to tell and really just uplift, inspire, and give folks a platform to talk about their first generation lived experiences because it's awesome. So that's what's coming next on the podcast. You can look forward to hearing from other folks. I'm going to have my friends on here. One of my friends is going to come on and we're going to talk about the story on how we fell out in high school. Lots of drama, but lots of fun moments to share there. But I also want to take the opportunity to have influential people on here. So I'm thinking on reaching out to a few community leaders that I know, having them share their upbringing and what led them to start their different community organizations. So I really hope you guys enjoyed the first episode. I really, really, really hope that you tune in for the other ones. Please follow us on Instagram at Mijo Podcast and on TikTok at The Mijo Podcast. Visit our website, www.mijopodcast.com, so that you could subscribe and get notified every time we release an episode. We will be dropping episodes every other Wednesday, so tune in to that. Follow us on Instagram so that you can see those sneak peeks. And honestly, just share this with your friends. If you had a good time and you think someone would enjoy my podcast, please, from the bottom of my heart, share it with them. Because as I like to say, being first generation is hard as fuck, but you're not alone. Thank you so much for tuning in and have a wonderful day.